What if a single moment could test everything you've taught your children about dignity and courage? Picture this: two young black sisters, brilliant inventors, stepping onto a first-class flight they've rightfully earned. Their hearts are full of excitement, their future wide open. Then a flight attendant leans down and says, "Sweetheart, I need you to move, not because of safety, not because of policy, but because a white senator's family wanted their seats." In that instant, the world froze. Would you tell your children to stay quiet, to obey authority and avoid trouble? Or would you want them to stand tall, to call home, and let truth speak louder than fear? What happened next didn't just shake an airline, it changed federal law, because sometimes all it takes to expose injustice is the courage to say, "We're not moving." This isn't just about a flight. It's about every person who's ever been told they didn't belong and chose to believe they did anyway. Before we take off, hit like, share, and subscribe. Because this story will remind you, even at 30,000 feet, courage can rise higher than prejudice. The hum of the aircraft filled the cabin like a soft electric heartbeat. Outside, the Atlanta afternoon shimmered, sunlight bouncing off the curved body of Flight 2871 bound for New York City. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and leather first class, quiet and gleaming, a place where people spoke softly and expected to be obeyed. And then the hush broke. "Sweetheart," the flight attendant said, bending over two teenage girls sitting near the front row. "I'm going to need you and your sister to move to another section. A family needs to sit together." Her voice was syrup-sweet, but beneath it ran a current of command. The sisters looked up. Ava and Amara Daniels, 17 and 15, identical down to the soft curls that brushed their shoulders. Different only in the quiet light of their eyes. Ava the elder, steady, analytical. Amara curious, quick to feel. Both brilliant, both exhausted, both flying to a destination that could change their lives. Ava blinked. "Excuse me, ma'am, these are our seats." The flight attendant, whose name tag read Karen Hollister, smiled in the way people do when they believe they're being patient with children. "I understand, honey, but first class is fully booked. The senator's family needs to be seated together. You'll still have excellent seats just a few rows back. Hardly a difference." She said it like it was a kindness, like she was doing them a favor. Amara frowned, glancing at her sister. "But our dad bought these seats," she said softly. "For us." Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "And I'm sure he did. But sometimes, young ladies, we make exceptions for families with special circumstances." From 4 rows back, a man's voice interrupted, loud, polished, dripping entitlement. "Karen, are we all set? My wife and I can't have our boy sitting alone. You understand. He's only 12. It was Senator Charles Whitmore, though the girls didn't recognize him yet. His wife, elegant in pearls, nodded approvingly. Of course, dear. They'll understand. They're just kids. Just kids. The words stung harder than either girl expected. Ava swallowed, straightening in her seat. Ma'am, with respect, these seats have our names on them. Karen's smile thinned. I'm sure you'll be more comfortable back there anyway. It's less formal, more relaxed. Amara's pulse quickened. She could feel heat rising in her cheeks. Less formal, more relaxed. She knew what that meant. She'd heard it in other ways before, in stores, at science fairs, in classrooms. That tone that said you don't belong here. Her sister's voice cut through the hum. Calm, firm. We're not moving. For a second, the air seemed to pause. Karen blinked, taken aback by the confidence in Ava's tone. Passengers nearby began to glance up from their tablets and champagne glasses, the unspoken question hovering between them. What's happening? Karen leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I don't think you understand how this works, sweetheart. The crew has authority to reassign seats if needed. I need you to cooperate." Ava's jaw tightened. "We do understand, and we're keeping our seats." The tension was quiet but immense, like the stillness before a storm. The morning had started with laughter. The Daniels sisters stood outside their modest home in Decatur, Georgia, taking a selfie with their mom before the airport shuttle arrived. Their father, Dr. Marcus Daniels, had already flown ahead to New York to prepare for their presentation. Ava had packed her navy blazer, pressed twice. Amara carried the prototype of their inventions, a compact water purification unit the size of a lunchbox. It was called AquaPure, and it could clean a gallon of contaminated water in under 5 minutes. The girls weren't just traveling for fun. They were traveling to accept a federal innovation grant for young scientists, a program their father had helped create after decades working as an environmental engineer. He'd told them the night before, over dinner, "Tomorrow, when you sit in those seats, don't think of them as luxury. Think of them as representation. You earned them. You belong there." Their mother, Dr. Layla Daniels, added quietly, "People will see your skin first. Make them remember your minds." So when they boarded the plane, clutching their boarding passes, seats 2A and 2B, they felt proud, nervous, but ready. The unaccompanied minor lanyards they wore around their necks weren't just identifiers. They were small symbols of responsibility. 2 young black scientists on their way to present technology that could bring clean water to thousands. They'd worked for 3 years on AquaPure, 3 years of trial and failure, solder burns and broken filters, testing water from creeks and puddles and old lead pipes. When the device finally worked, their school held an assembly. The mayor sent a letter. A tech magazine called them the future of clean energy. And now this flight, this trip, it was supposed to be their moment of validation. The smile had vanished from Karen's face. She stood now, rigid. "I'm not going to ask again," she said quietly. "Please collect your belongings." Ava looked around. The businessman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. The woman behind them pretended to read. Even the senator and his wife avoided eye contact. No one was going to speak for them. "Ma'am," Ava said, her voice low but steady, "we're not moving. Our tickets say first class. We're staying in our seats." Karen's tone hardened. "You're refusing a direct instruction from crew. That can have consequences. Then write that down." Ava replied, "Write exactly what happened." It wasn't defiance for the sake of it. It was clarity, the kind their father had drilled into them when you're confronted with injustice. Stay calm, stay factual, document everything. Amara's hands trembled in her lap. "Ava," she whispered, "don't." Her sister's hand found hers, squeezing tight. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. Amara could feel the eyes of the entire cabin pressing on them, the weight of being seen, judged, and measured by standards they didn't set. Karen turned to glance back at the senator, who gave a small, impatient nod, as if to say, "Why is this taking so long?" That tiny gesture ignited something deep inside Ava, a quiet, focused anger. She reached into her backpack, pulled out her phone, and placed it on the armrest. The screen glowed. Camera app open. Recording. Karen froze. "What are you doing?" "Recording," Ava said. "For our safety?" "You can't do that," the woman hissed. Amara looked up, her voice shaky but clear. "Then stop giving us a reason to." The hum of the plane seemed louder now. Karen straightened her uniform, forcing a professional smile back onto her face. "I'll speak with the captain," she said curtly. turning on her heel and marching toward the galley. Silence. Ava exhaled slowly, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. Amara leaned close. What if she calls security? Ava's voice trembled but didn't break. Then we called Dad. That single sentence held centuries of resilience, the quiet knowledge that, sometimes, survival meant preparedness. 10 rows behind them, a man had been watching, mid-50s, black, wearing a gray suit and wire-rimmed glasses. His name was Harold Patterson, a retired pilot. He'd seen things like this before, in uniform and out. He caught Ava's eye and gave a slow nod. Not pity, respect. Amara blinked back tears she didn't want to shed. Why do they always think we don't belong? She whispered. Ava looked at her sister. Because they're not used to seeing us here. Then why does it hurt so much? Because we still hoped they'd see us for who we are. Minutes later, Karen returned, flanked by another attendant, a younger man with kind eyes. His badge read Eli Park. He spoke first. Ladies, I'm sorry about the confusion. The captain's reviewing the seating request. Everything's okay for now. Karen folded her arms, her smile thin and forced. We'll sort this out once we're airborne. The sisters didn't respond. They just sat, hands clasped, the phone still recording quietly beside them. Outside the window, the runway shimmered in heat. Ava watched as the baggage carts rolled past, as the world went on indifferent to the quiet war happening in row 2. She remembered her father's voice again, the night before. The higher you climb, the louder the wind. But the view is still worth it. She didn't know then how right he'd be. The plane had not yet taken off. But for Ava and Amara, it already felt like a journey through turbulence. The hum of the cabin blended with the murmurs of other passengers, whispers that rose and fell like soft waves. They sat side by side, their shoulders touching, holding on to silence as if it were armor. Through the window, the city shimmered below them. Atlanta home. The place where their story began long before this flight. Long before the leather seats and disapproving stares. Ava closed her eyes for a moment, and her mind slipped backward to mornings that smelled of solder and coffee, to a cramped garage transformed into a lab, to the heartbeat of invention that had pulsed in their family for as long as she could remember. Their father, Dr. Marcus Daniels, always said the world could be rebuilt one problem at a time. Their mother, Dr. Layla Daniels, believed healing came from both medicine and justice. The twins had grown up between microscopes and moral lessons, between curiosity and caution. When other kids played basketball or streamed shows, Ava and Amara took apart radios and water filters. They learned early that creativity wasn't about fun. It was survival. See this, Marcus would say, holding a cracked faucet or a bottle of cloudy water. This is what injustice looks like when it doesn't make the news. You want to change the world. Start by fixing what others ignore. That was how AquaPure began, not as an assignment, not as a science fair project, but as a promise. One summer, the water in their neighborhood turned brown. Officials said it was safe, but Layla refused to let her daughters drink it. Trust data, not excuses, she told them. So they built filters from plastic bottles, charcoal, and old pumps scavenged from the recycling center. Weeks later, when their prototype worked for the first time turning murky water, crystal clear, Ava danced barefoot in the garage, and Amara laughed until she cried. Their father framed the photo of that moment. It still hung in the living room, labeled in his neat handwriting, proof of possibility. Over the years, the device evolved. The girls added solar charging, self-cleaning filters, even sensors that could detect contamination levels in real time. By the time Ava turned 16, AquaPure had caught national attention, A local reporter called them the sisters who clean the future. A small tech investor funded their patent. Their father turned down several large corporate offers because he believed in community ownership. "We're not selling our voice," he'd said. "We're amplifying it." That philosophy shaped everything they did, and it also painted a target on them. At events, people called them adorable before reading their research. Some assumed they were student interns instead of founders. Others congratulated their parents instead of them. Ava had learned to smile politely while Amara bit her tongue until it almost bled. They endured microaggressions dressed as compliments. "You speak so well. You're surprisingly technical for your age. You remind me of my nieces. They love gadgets, too." Their parents told them these things were not compliments. They were reminders that no matter how high they climbed, there would always be people waiting to cut the ladder. That was why the trip to New York mattered so much. This wasn't just another presentation. It was the final step before partnering with a national environmental foundation. The contract would fund their initiative to install AquaPure units in low-income housing complexes across the South. It wasn't about money. It was about access. It was about dignity. They had spent months preparing, perfecting their pitch, polishing data slides, rehearsing answers to every possible question. And when they received the invitation from the Environmental Technology Conference, their father made a decision that felt symbolic. He upgraded their tickets to first class. "Representation matters," he said, handing them the boarding passes. "You've earned the right to take up space." The words sank deep into Ava's chest. Take up space. For once, it felt like they could breathe in a room that wasn't shrinking to fit other people's comfort. But as the plane now idled on the runway, Ava could feel that space tightening again. Earlier that week, she had stood in front of her mirror, practicing her speech. "Clean water is not a privilege. It's a promise we owe to every child." She had whispered it again and again, trying to sound confident, but inside she had felt the tremor of fear that came with visibility. Because visibility was double-edged. It gave you power, and it made you a target. Amara had peeked into the room then, holding a tray of cookies. "You'll be fine," she'd said with a grin. "You always are." Ava smiled at the memory now, though her heart felt heavy. The overhead announcement crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be departing shortly. Please take your seats and fasten your belts." The tension in the air shifted as flight attendants walked through the aisles checking seat belts. Karen passed by again, her heels clicking like punctuation marks against the carpet. She didn't look at the girls this time, but Ava noticed the stiffness in her posture, the kind that comes from anger held just below the surface. Amara glanced nervously at her sister. "She's still mad." "I know. What if she tries again?" "Then we stay calm," Ava whispered. "We document. We protect each other. Dad always said truth is louder than fear." Amara finished. They both smiled faintly. It was a family mantra, etched into their bones. The engines roared to life, pushing the plane forward. As they lifted off the ground, the girls watched the city fall away beneath them, rows of houses, winding highways, small patches of green. Atlanta shrank into a quilt of light and motion, and for a brief, quiet moment, it felt like freedom. Ava rested her head against the window, thinking of her parents. She imagined her father in New York, waiting at the terminal with his familiar calm, his hand raised in a quiet wave. She pictured her mother at the hospital, finishing another double shift, checking her phone between rounds to make sure her daughters were safe. Amara nudged her gently. "Remember the first time we flew alone?" Ava chuckled. "Yeah. You cried because they took your juice box at security. I was 7. You were dramatic." Amara rolled her eyes, laughing softly. For a moment, It felt normal again, like sisters teasing each other, like kids on an adventure instead of activists carrying expectations heavier than their luggage. But underneath their laughter was something else, a quiet knowing that joy, for them, was never simple. It always came with disclaimers. Ober, no. 15 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign turned off. Karen's voice echoed over the intercom, polite and professional. We'll begin beverage service shortly. Please remain seated as the crew prepares. Eli Park, the younger attendant, passed through the aisle offering warm smiles. When he reached the twins, he crouched slightly so he could speak softly. Hey, I just wanted to say, your invention, AquaPure. Right, I read about it on Tech today. It's amazing work. Ava blinked, surprised. You read about it? He nodded. Yeah, I'm studying environmental engineering part-time. You two are inspiring. Amara beamed, gratitude flickering across her face. Thank you, she said quietly. Eli lowered his voice. For what it's worth. I'm sorry about earlier. Some people forget what respect looks like, before they could reply. Karen's voice called sharply from the galley. Eli, I need you in the back. He stood quickly, gave them an apologetic nod, and walked away. Amara whispered, At least one person sees us. Ava's gaze followed him. Sometimes that's enough to stay standing. Outside, clouds stretched across the sky like endless fields of white. The plane sliced through them, gliding toward a horizon painted in gold. Ava thought of their project again, the reason for all of this. She thought of the children in Mississippi and Flint who still drank bottled water because their taps ran toxic. She thought of their dream, a network of self-sustaining filters that communities could control themselves. But more than that, she thought of dignity. Every design decision, every line of code, every test, they weren't just solving a scientific problem. They were challenging a social one, the idea that safety and comfort belonged only to the privileged. As the plane sailed northward, Ava realized that this flight, in its own cruel way, mirrored their mission. They had built something to give others clean water, and now they were being told to move for someone else's comfort. An hour into the flight, Karen returned. The calm professionalism had evaporated. She leaned slightly toward them. Her tone clipped. Ladies, we're still facing a seating issue. I'll need you to move to row 11. Ava's heart thudded. We've already discussed this, ma'am. Karen exhaled sharply. I'm not asking again. Amara's fingers gripped the armrest. She felt that old ache of injustice rise in her chest, the same one she'd felt when a teacher once accused her of cheating because her score was too high. The same one she'd felt when a security guard followed her through a store. It was always the same story, different setting. Ava met the attendant's gaze. Then we'll have to speak with the captain. Karen's eyes flashed. You're going to regret that attitude. Ava smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Not as much as you will. Karen froze, caught off guard by the calm certainty in Ava's voice. For a brief second, she saw something in the girl's eyes, something unshakable, not anger, not defiance. Truth. She turned abruptly and walked away. Amara let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You shouldn't have said that, she whispered. Maybe not, Ava admitted. But someone has to. The plane continued forward, steady and indifferent. Above them, the sky stretched endless and silent, holding witness to a battle that was only beginning. The seatbelt light blinked off again, but there was no peace in row 2. The hum of the engines masked whispers spreading through first class. Ava could feel them like static small, invisible currents of judgment. She didn't have to hear the words to know what they meant. It was always the same rhythm: curiosity first, then disbelief, then dismissal. Karen Hollister's footsteps clicked toward the back of the cabin. Ava watched her reflection in the glossy window, the way the woman leaned close to the senator's wife, whispering in a tone meant to sound discreet but sharp enough to cut through air. Every few seconds, the senator would glance up toward the twins, eyes narrowing as though their existence were a personal inconvenience. Amara shifted beside her, restless. "She's talking about us." "I know." Ava's voice was steady. "Let her." Amara turned, searching her sister's face. "Ava, we're 2 hours from landing. Maybe we just move. It's not worth it." Ava's gaze didn't waver. "It's always worth it. Every time we make it easy for them, it gets harder for the next person." Their conversation ended when Karen returned, this time with a tighter smile, her lipstick immaculate, her patience gone. "Ladies," she began, "the captain's aware of the seating situation. He's given permission for a reassignment due to a comfort request from our VIP passengers. We need your cooperation." Ava folded her hands neatly on her lap. "Is that standard policy?" Karen blinked, irritated. "Excuse me," Ava repeated, her tone calm, deliberate. "Is it standard policy to downgrade paying passengers to accommodate a senator's family?" Karen straightened. "It's at the crew's discretion when necessary." "So it's discretionary," Ava said softly, "meaning not mandatory." The woman's mouth tightened. "I'm not going to debate airline policy with children." Amara flinched at the word. "Children." Again. "We're not debating," Ava said. "We're clarifying." Karen leaned closer, her perfume sharp, almost metallic. "Miss Daniels, if you continue to argue, I'll have security waiting when we land." Ava felt the threat settle like cold air, but she didn't blink. "If you do," she said quietly, "you'll be explaining why 2 passengers with valid first-class tickets were removed for refusing discrimination." The surrounding rows went silent. People pretended to read, but their ears strained. The unspoken discomfort was heavy and alive. Karen's jaw twitched. "Excuse me. You heard me." Ava's tone didn't rise, but her words carried. "And my phone heard you too." Karen froze for a second. Then she hissed, "You're recording this." "Of course," Ava said. "For safety. Delete it." Ava met her eyes. "No." A muscle jumped in Karen's cheek. She turned away sharply and stormed toward the galley. Amara leaned close, whispering, "You just declared war." "No," Ava murmured. "She did when she assumed we'd surrender." Across the aisle, a businessman adjusted his tie, pretending not to look. But when Karen disappeared, he leaned forward slightly and whispered, "Good for you." "Girls?" Amara blinked in surprise. "Thank you, sir." He nodded. "I have 2 daughters your age. They shouldn't have to fight for their seats either." Ava smiled faintly, gratitude mixing with exhaustion. "Neither should we." The man's face softened. "For what it's worth. I'll back you if this gets messy." "Appreciate that," Ava said. "It probably will." As he turned away, Amara whispered, "Maybe not everyone's blind," Ava replied. "No, but most stay silent." They both fell quiet again. The clouds outside looked endless, stretching in every direction, white, pure, untouched. It was strange, Ava thought, how something so peaceful could surround such turbulence inside a cabin. Half an hour later, Karen returned, her professionalism polished back into place, but her eyes betrayed her. She leaned toward Ava and Amara once more, voice like ice. "You'll be moved after beverage service. That's final." Ava didn't reply. She opened her tablet and began typing an email draft to her father, subject line incident, on Flight 2871. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed, but her words were precise. She described the situation factually, attaching the time-stamped video clips automatically uploaded from her phone. Amara watched. "Dad's gonna freak out. He'll stay calm," Ava said. "That's worse for them." When she hit send, a sense of control returned. Thin, but real. Moments later, Eli Park appeared again, pushing the beverage cart. His eyes darted nervously toward Karen, then back to the twins. He spoke in a low voice. You two holding up Ava nodded. "We're fine." "Thanks." He hesitated, then whispered, "Just be careful. She's talking to the purser about escalating what Amara asked." Eli's face was pale. "She's claiming non-compliance. If it goes in the report, it'll flag you with TSA." Amara's stomach dropped. "That's crazy." Eli shook his head slightly. "She's overstepping. Just keep everything documented. I'll testify if needed." Ava met his eyes. "You don't have to risk your job." He smiled faintly. "Some things are worth risking for." Karen's voice echoed from behind. "Eli, focus, please." He straightened, nodded at them almost imperceptibly, and rolled the cart away. The girls exchanged glances, half fear, half solidarity. Ava exhaled. "He's brave." Amara nodded. "Braver than most." The next 30 minutes passed in a tense rhythm. The plane's cabin dimmed as window shades lowered. The senator's family watched a movie, laughter occasionally punctuating the silence like reminders of entitlement. Then, near the midpoint of the flight, Karen reappeared again, this time accompanied by the purser, a tall man with a calm but distant expression. His name tag read, Mark Garrison. "Good afternoon," he said, his tone measured. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding about seating. We'd like to resolve this peacefully." "There's no misunderstanding," Ava said politely. "We're seated according to our tickets." He nodded slowly. "I understand. However, the crew has received a special request from Senator Whitmore to have his family seated together due to his son's anxiety issues during flight. We're simply asking for your cooperation." Ava's gaze didn't waver. "We empathize with that," she said evenly. "But we paid for these seats, and we're minors. You can't move us without guardian consent." Mark hesitated, clearly torn between procedure and politics. "The request comes with some sensitivity. I'd prefer not to escalate." "Then don't," Ava replied. "Let us stay where we are." Karen interjected sharply. "Sir, they've been argumentative from the start." Mark raised a hand. "Karen." But she wasn't finished. "They've been recording without permission." "They've Karen," he repeated, firmer now. "That's enough." The look on her face was pure disbelief, as though being contradicted in front of passengers was an offense against nature. She turned away, muttering under her breath. Mark sighed, leaning closer to the twins. "You're correct about parental consent. I'll make a note. I'll also remind my crew to remain professional." "Thank you," Ava said softly. As he walked away, Amara whispered, "Maybe it's over." Ava shook her head. "Not yet." And she was right. 15 minutes later, Karen approached again, pretending to serve water, but her tone carried venom. "Enjoy your seats while you can," she said quietly. "Rules won't save you when the system decides otherwise." Ava looked up, unflinching. "Then maybe the system needs changing." For a moment, Karen's mask cracked. "You think a couple of teenagers can change the system?" Ava's reply came like steel wrapped in silk. "We already are." Karen walked away without another word. Amara turned to her sister, her voice trembling. "What if she actually gets us in trouble?" Ava took her hand. "Then we handle it together. That's what we've always done." Silence stretched between them. Not fearful now, but resolute. Outside, The plane sliced through a curtain of clouds. Inside, two sisters sat side by side, small in frame but unmovable in spirit. Ava glanced down at the phone screen. The recording light still blinked red. Proof. Evidence. Truth. She didn't know it yet, but that tiny blinking light would ignite something far beyond this cabin. Across the aisle, the businessman who had spoken earlier leaned slightly forward again. "Miss," he whispered, "if she tries anything else, I'll stand up with you." Ava smiled faintly. "Thank you." He nodded once. "Don't let them take your dignity. It's worth more than any ticket." Those words sank deep. The next hour was heavy with anticipation. Karen avoided direct contact, but moved through the cabin like a storm cloud that refused to pass. Ava caught fragments of conversation crew whispers, headset murmurs, but couldn't make out details. Then, just before descent, a voice came over the intercom. It was Karen's, firm and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a passenger issue, we may experience a brief delay upon landing. Please remain seated until instructed." Amara's stomach twisted. "She's talking about us, isn't she?" Ava nodded slowly. "She's setting it up." "Setting what up?" "A confrontation." They exchanged a glance that said everything. The recording kept rolling. The red light blinked on. Ava pressed send again this time, uploading the footage directly to their company's secure server, linked to an emergency alert protocol her father had built months earlier. If anything happened, he'd know. The captain's voice soon followed, smooth and neutral. "We appreciate your cooperation as we coordinate with ground personnel." Ava closed her eyes, steadying her breath. "Stay calm," she murmured. Amara squeezed her hand. Always. Somewhere behind them, the senator's wife sighed audibly. "Some people just love causing scenes." The words hit like static. But Ava didn't react. Not this time. Her silence was louder than any argument. As the plane began its slow descent through thick gray clouds, lightning flickered far away, tiny flashes that seemed to mirror the storm quietly brewing in the cabin. Two sisters sat in seats 2A and 2B, unmoving, their presence a quiet protest against a world that kept trying to shrink them. And somewhere deep in Ava's chest, beneath fear and exhaustion, something fierce began to burn. Not rage, but purpose. The kind of purpose that doesn't fade when the flight ends. It was only the beginning. The descent felt endless. Every minute seemed to stretch, heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. Ava could sense it something deliberate in the way Karen paced the aisle. Her steps clipped and precise, like a drumbeat counting down to conflict. Passengers pretended to relax, but the atmosphere was electric. You could almost hear the collective heartbeat of people waiting for the scene to unfold. Amara's fingers fidgeted with the edge of her boarding pass, folding and unfolding the paper. She's not going to let this go. Is she? No, Ava said quietly. She's setting a trap. Maybe the captain will stop her. Ava shook her head slowly. If he wanted to, he would have by now. Outside, raindrops streaked across the window. The plane cut through a layer of thick gray clouds, lights from the city below starting to shimmer faintly. Ava thought about how many people lived down there, rushing home, completely unaware that in this small metal tube above them, a lesson about power, race, and truth was about to play out. Karen reappeared, this time not alone. A male flight attendant followed her, younger, with uncertainty clouding his face. His body language screamed discomfort. She's making him witness whatever comes next, Ava realized. Karen stopped at row 2 and crouched slightly, her professional smile brittle. Ladies, we're making our final approach into Washington. Once we land, security officers will need to speak with you. Amara's voice trembled. Why, Karen's eyes gleamed. satisfaction barely hidden. You've refused crew instructions and created a disruption. That's a violation of FAA regulations. Ava stared at her. You mean we refused to surrender our seats? Karen's tone sharpened. You refused lawful direction. There's a difference. No, Ava said, voice steady. There isn't. Her calm seemed to throw Karen off balance. The woman straightened, adjusting her name tag like armor. You can explain it to the authorities when we land. Good, Ava said softly. Because they'll hear the whole recording. Karen blinked. What recording? The one where you threatened us, discriminated against us, and confirmed moving minors without guardian consent. The younger attendant behind her flinched. Karen's expression faltered, then hardened again. You're bluffing. Ava tilted her phone slightly, the red light still blinking. Am I? Karen turned abruptly and marched back toward the galley. The younger attendant hesitated before following, whispering, I'm sorry. As he passed, Amara's voice cracked. Ava, what if they really arrest us? They won't, Ava said, but her hands were shaking now. They'll try to intimidate us, not arrest us. Just remember what Dad said. Truth protects us if we stand in it. Amara took a deep breath and nodded. Truth protects us. Minutes later, the wheels hit the runway. The jolt snapped everyone's attention forward. The engines roared, the flaps lifted, and the aircraft slowed, rolling toward the gate in tense silence. No applause, no chatter, just quiet anticipation. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Karen's voice filled the cabin again, clear and formal. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Law enforcement officers will be boarding momentarily to assist with a passenger issue. A low murmur spread. People exchanged uneasy glances. Ava could feel eyes on her and Amara. She straightened her shoulders, forcing calm. Stay composed, she whispered. The cabin door opened. 2 uniformed airport security officers entered, followed by a supervisor in a dark blazer with the airline's crest on his lapel. The energy in the cabin shifted instantly. Passengers leaned forward, their curiosity now fully awake. Karen approached the officers quickly. These are the 2 minors causing the issue, she said, pointing toward the twins. They refused to comply with crew instructions and have been recording unauthorized video during flight. The supervisor frowned. They're unaccompanied minors. Yes. Then you should have contacted their guardian, not escalated mid-air. The supervisor said sharply. Karen blinked, caught off guard. Sir, I followed procedure. Did you document guardian consent for seat reassignment? She hesitated. It wasn't necessary. It's always necessary with minors, the supervisor said coldly, especially on upgraded tickets. Ava exhaled slowly. Truth was starting to surface. The taller officer approached the twins. Ladies, could we see your boarding passes? Please. Ava handed them over without trembling. Here you go, sir. He checked, then nodded to the supervisor. Seats 2A and 2B, confirmed. The supervisor turned toward Karen. These are full-fare first-class seats. What's the issue? Karen's voice rose. Defensive. The senator's family requested. The senator's family, the supervisor interrupted, his tone cutting like a blade. So this isn't a compliance issue. It's a favoritism issue. A hush fell across the cabin. Ava glanced toward the senator's wife, who suddenly found her magazine deeply interesting. The supervisor sighed, rubbing his temple. Karen, do you have any idea what this looks like? Her voice cracked for the first time. I was just trying to what? Move 2 young black passengers from their rightful seats to accommodate VIPs. Passengers whispered now, their voices threading through the silence. A few began recording on their phones. Karen stammered. That's not what I save it, the supervisor said, his tone final. He turned to the twins. "Ladies, I'm deeply sorry. You've done absolutely nothing wrong. You'll deplane first, and I'll personally escort you to your father." Ava's composure finally wavered. Relief flooded her chest, but she held her chin high. "Thank you, sir." Karen opened her mouth again, desperate. "Sir, may I explain?" The supervisor raised his hand. "You can explain it to corporate." The businessman across the aisle spoke up suddenly, his voice clear and steady. "For the record, I witnessed everything. The girls were polite, respectful, and followed every instruction. The only disruption came from the crew." Several passengers murmured agreement. A woman from row 3 lifted her phone. "I recorded it too, including when she said, 'You people.'" The supervisor's expression hardened. "We'll need that footage." Karen turned pale. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "No," Ava said softly, standing up. "It's finally fair." The officer stepped aside as the twins gathered their things. Amara's hands were trembling so badly that Ava reached over and squeezed them. "It's over," she whispered. "You did great." When they walked off the plane, the silence behind them felt monumental, like the pause before an era ends. But it wasn't over, not yet. Their father was waiting at the gate, flanked by 2 men in suits from the airline's corporate security. His expression was unreadable calm, but deadly focused. The moment he saw his daughters, he stepped forward and embraced them both. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No." "Dad," Ava said. "Just shaken." He exhaled, eyes darkening. "They picked the wrong family this time." The supervisor approached, his tone formal. "Dr. Daniels, I'm terribly sorry for what your daughters experienced. We'll be conducting an internal investigation immediately." "Not internal," Dr. Daniels said coolly. "Independent." "Sir, I want every second of that flight security footage preserved. No edits, no deletions. My legal team will subpoena if necessary." The man nodded quickly. "Understood." As they walked toward the terminal lounge, Amara whispered, "Dad, we didn't mean for it to get this big." He stopped, turning to face her. "You didn't make it big, sweetheart. You made it visible." He knelt to their level, his voice soft but steady. "What you did was brave. You told the truth, and now the truth will make them answer for it." In the reflection of the terminal glass, the plane still sat at the gate, a silent witness to everything that had unfolded. Karen was escorted out minutes later, her uniform disheveled, eyes downcast. She glanced up once as the Daniels family stood together in the corridor. For the first time, her face showed something other than anger. It was fear. Ava met her gaze, not with vengeance, but with quiet strength. Then she turned away. That night, the video went viral. Passengers' recordings, combined with Ava's original footage, flooded social media. Millions watched as 2 composed teenage girls stood against discrimination at 30,000 feet. Hashtags exploded: Yaknyar Flight 2847, Fly Fair, Daniels Twins. News anchors dissected every moment. Legal analysts debated civil rights implications. Airline executives scrambled for statements. And somewhere, in a quiet hotel room, Ava scrolled through the comments. People were angry, supportive, inspired. Some were defensive. Some were awakened. Amara sat beside her, silent for a long time. "Do you think it'll change anything?" Ava stared at the screen, the reflection of the video flickering in her eyes. "It already has." But deep down, she knew this was only the start. Change wasn't instant, it was earned. One confrontation, one truth, one recorded moment at a time. She closed her phone, leaned her head against her sister's shoulder, and whispered, "Tomorrow, The world's going to call us brave. But all we did was refuse to move. Amara smiled faintly. Sometimes. That's enough. The rain outside the window turned into a soft rhythm against the glass. Somewhere between fear and pride, the sisters found peace. And beyond that hotel window, the story of Flight 2847 became something much larger, a mirror held up to a nation still learning how to see itself. Morning light crept through the hotel curtains, thin and pale, the kind of light that makes everything feel raw and honest. Ava lay awake long before sunrise, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of traffic. Her mind replayed every moment of the flight like a loop that refused to stop. The sound of Karen's voice, the disbelief in the passenger's eyes, the weight of standing her ground. Beside her, Amara slept fitfully, murmuring fragments of dreams that sounded too close to memory. Their father had been awake all night. When Ava finally stepped into the adjoining room, he was still dressed in the same suit from the airport. Laptop open, legal pads covered in notes. Coffee cups lined the desk like silent witnesses. He looked up, exhaustion softened by pride. "Morning, sweetheart." Ava hesitated. "Did you sleep at all?" He smiled faintly. "Sleep is for people who aren't fighting a corporation." "Is it really going that far?" Dr. Daniels leaned back, stretching. "It already has. The airline contacted us at midnight. They're calling it an incident under review. That's PR talk for damage control." Ava frowned. "So they're protecting themselves." "They always do at first," he said, "until evidence makes silence impossible." He turned the laptop toward her. On the screen were dozens of notifications, emails from reporters, civil rights lawyers, and organizations offering support. Social media had turned their story into a movement overnight. Ava scrolled through headlines. Teen sisters record airline discrimination. Senator's privilege exposed at 30,000 feet. Courage at cruising altitude. She felt dizzy. Amara appeared at the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Why is everyone talking about us, Doctor?" Daniels reached out a hand, pulling her close. "Because you did something extraordinary. You told the truth when it mattered most." Amara frowned. "But we just didn't move." He smiled gently. "Exactly. Sometimes not moving is the bravest thing of all." There was a knock at the door. A hotel attendant handed over a large envelope marked Federal Aviation Administration. Dr. Daniels opened it slowly. Inside was a formal notice. "This correspondence serves as acknowledgement of an official inquiry into Flight 2847 regarding potential violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and FAA Safety Protocol." Amara blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means, Dr. Daniels said, that your recording started a federal investigation. By noon, reporters crowded the hotel lobby. Cameras flashed as the Daniels family moved through a wall of microphones. Journalists shouted questions. How did it feel? Do you plan to sue? Has the senator reached out? Dr. Daniels raised a hand. No comments at this time. Our focus is the truth, not the headlines. But Ava noticed something powerful in that chaos. People weren't just curious. They were angry, invested, alive with empathy. Strangers stopped to thank them, to apologize, to share their own stories of bias. The sisters had become symbols, though they never asked to be. That afternoon, they met with an investigator named Agent Lillian Moore, a calm woman with silver hair and a gaze sharp as glass. Her tone was professional, but her eyes held something warmer recognition. "I've reviewed the footage," she said, setting a tablet on the table. "It's clear, and it's damning. The flight attendant's remarks, the senator's involvement, the crew's failure to intervene, all documented." Dr. Daniels nodded. What happens next? The FAA will issue a formal inquiry to the airline and subpoena internal communications. Meanwhile, the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights will conduct its own review. Ava exchanged a glance with Amara. So, this could change things. Agent Moore smiled slightly. If we do it right, yes. You've exposed something bigger than one flight. This could reshape how discrimination is addressed in the aviation industry. She paused. Studying Ava, you showed remarkable composure. Most adults don't handle confrontation that well. Ava shrugged lightly. I didn't feel composed. That's how courage feels, Moore said, like fear with purpose. When the meeting ended, Moore handed them her card. You'll be contacted again soon, and Ava, keep that phone safe. It's not just a recording now, it's evidence. For days, the media storm only grew. Talk shows debated their actions. Some praised them as heroes. Others accused them of overreacting. Politicians weighed in. Activists rallied. The senator's office released a statement calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding exaggerated by social media. But the video didn't lie. Every word, every expression, every moment of injustice was crystal clear. Within a week, the airline's CEO held a press conference. Cameras flashed as she stood behind a podium, flanked by executives. Her voice trembled only slightly. Effective immediately, she announced, "We are implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all flight and ground staff. We are establishing an independent oversight committee for discrimination complaints, and we are terminating all crew members found responsible for misconduct aboard Flight 2847. Karen Hollister's name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. Everyone already knew. Ava and Amara watched the broadcast from home. Amara whispered, "She got fired." Ava nodded slowly. So did the people who helped her. Their father turned down the volume. "Justice isn't about revenge," he said softly. "It's about accountability. What matters is that the system learns." Ava stared at the screen, thoughtful. "Do you think they'll really change, Dr.?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Change starts with a crack. You made one." Weeks passed. The noise began to fade, but the impact didn't. Letters poured in from schools, community leaders, even pilots thanking them for their courage. One evening, a package arrived addressed to the twins. Inside was a handwritten note on official FAA letterhead. Your courage has led to proposed amendments in passenger protection protocols. Future regulations will ensure that no unaccompanied minor may be reassigned without verified guardian consent, regardless of class or circumstance. Below it, another line. Your recording will be archived as precedent in federal training materials. Amara looked up, stunned. They changed the law. Ava felt tears rise, unbidden. We didn't just fight back. We fixed something. Later that night, as the world outside quieted, the sisters sat on the porch under a sky scattered with stars. Fireflies blinked across the yard like tiny lanterns. Amara whispered. Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? Ava thought for a long time. Sometimes, but then I remember Mr. Lang and Eli and that woman who spoke up. It wasn't all bad. It showed us who people really are and who we are, Amara added softly. Ava smiled. Yeah, who we are. She pulled out her phone and replayed the video one last time, not to relive the fear, but to remember the strength. The camera's shaky frame captured a truth bigger than 2 passengers and a flight crew. It captured a moment when silence broke. The next morning, news outlets ran new headlines. Federal bill. Inspired by teen inventors passes committee vote. Lawmakers called it the Daniels Amendment, designed to protect travelers from discriminatory treatment and ensure accountability for airline staff nationwide. Doctor? Daniels watched the coverage quietly, pride flickering in his eyes. See, he said, you didn't just stand your ground. You moved the ground beneath them. Amara laughed softly. Dad, that sounds like something from one of your lectures. He grinned. Maybe, but it's true. Ava looked at her sister, then out the window where the sky opened wide and blue. We were supposed to fly to New York to meet investors, she said. Instead, we met the truth, and we survived it. Amara replied. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that feels full, not empty. Somewhere far away, planes cut through the same sky that once held their fear. And now, because of them, it held something else to justice. The story of Flight 2847 would fade from headlines eventually, replaced by new scandals and new heroes. But for those who watched, it lingered as proof that courage could come from the most unexpected places. Two young sisters, unarmed except for a phone and their integrity, had forced a billion-dollar industry to face itself. And that, Ava thought, was the real victory. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of distant engines wash over her. They no longer felt like threats. They sounded like freedom. Autumn came early that year. The trees outside the Daniels home turned amber and gold, their leaves drifting across the front porch like quiet reminders of change. For the first time in months, life was beginning to feel normal again, or at least a new version of it. The headlines had faded, the protests had quieted, but the ripples of Flight 2847 still spread quietly through the world. Ava and Amara returned to school, but nothing felt the same. Teachers looked at them differently, not as students, but as symbols. Reporters still emailed for follow-ups. Documentary crews requested interviews. Universities invited them to speak about resilience and equality. It was strange, Ava thought, to become an idea when all she had wanted was to be left alone. One afternoon after class, she sat on the steps overlooking the campus courtyard. The air smelled like cut grass and chalk dust. Amara joined her, holding 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. Everyone keeps asking what it felt like, Amara said, handing her one. Like they think there's a right answer. Ava smiled faintly. Tell them it felt like fear and fire and finding out who we are. Amara sipped quietly. Do you think Karen ever thinks about it? What she did, Ava thought for a long moment. Maybe. I hope so. People like her, they don't wake up evil. They just never get challenged enough to see themselves clearly. Their conversation paused when Dr. Daniels approached from the parking lot, carrying a folder tucked under one arm. His smile was soft but proud. Girls, he said, I have something for you to see. He opened the folder and pulled out a glossy printed letter bearing the seal of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Ava read the headline aloud, her voice catching slightly. Implementation of Federal Passenger Fairness Act, also known as the Daniels Amendment. Her eyes widened. It passed. Her father nodded. Yesterday. Unanimous vote. Effective immediately. Amara gasped. That means, Doctor, Daniels said, you just helped change federal law. Every airline in America now has to follow new anti-discrimination procedures. It's official. The moment felt unreal. Ava ran her fingers over the embossed seal, the weight of history pressing softly against her palm. We did it, she whispered. Doctor. Daniels smiled. You did it. That night, the family celebrated quietly at home. No reporters, no cameras, just laughter, music, and the smell of homemade peach cobbler filling the kitchen. Their mother, Dr. Naomi Daniels, had returned from her medical conference weeks ago. She hadn't been there when the story broke. but she had carried the guilt like a shadow. Tonight, for the first time, she looked free of it. As they ate, she lifted her glass. "To my daughters," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You faced something I hoped you'd never have to face, and you turned it into light." Amara grinned shyly. "We had good teachers." Naomi laughed through tears. "You had good hearts." Later, when the dishes were done and the house was quiet, Ava sat by the window, looking out at the dark yard. Her father joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Hard to believe it's over," he said. Ava shook her head. "It's not over. Not really. It just changed shape." He nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. But you changed too." She looked at him. "Do you think that's good or bad? Neither," he said. "It's just the cost of knowing the world as it really is." Silence settled between them, comfortable and deep. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the faint hum of distant traffic. The next morning, an email arrived from the airline's CEO, addressed directly to Ava and Amara. "Dear Miss Daniels and Miss Daniels, our company formally acknowledges your courage and integrity. Following the investigation, we have dismissed the employees responsible, revised our corporate policies, and partnered with the National Youth STEM Foundation to establish a scholarship in your honor. The Daniels Scholarship for Equity and Innovation will fund young Black inventors nationwide. We hope you accept this as both an apology and a commitment to change." Amara read it twice. "They named a scholarship after us." Ava smiled slowly. "Guess that's one way to say sorry." That evening, the twins appeared via video at a national conference on youth innovation. Behind them, the scholarship's new logo glowed a stylized image of 2 young girls holding a light bulb, its filament shaped like wings. When it was Ava's turn to speak, she paused before the microphone, scanning the sea of faces. "We didn't plan to make history," she began. "We just wanted to be treated fairly, but fairness shouldn't require courage. It should be the baseline." The crowd fell silent. She continued, "What happened on that flight wasn't just about us. It was about everyone who's ever been told to move, to wait, to stay quiet, to make space for someone else's comfort. We didn't move, and because of that, maybe the world did." Applause filled the room. Amara stood beside her, eyes shining, and whispered, "You sound like Dad." Ava laughed softly. "He's rubbing off on me." Months later, life settled into a rhythm again. Their invention, the clean water filtration device, was in production, thanks to investors inspired by their courage. The twins were invited to tour factories, visit schools, and speak at environmental panels. Each trip reminded them that their story had grown beyond that flight. It had become a call for justice, equality, and compassion. But one invitation was different. It came in a plain envelope from an address in Virginia. The sender's name made Ava pause. Karen Hollister. The letter inside was handwritten, the pen strokes uneven. "Dear Ava and Amara, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. You have every reason to hate me. I lost my job, my reputation, and a lot of friends. But I've also gained something I never expected: clarity. Watching the video of myself was painful. I saw the bias in my eyes, the entitlement in my voice, the harm I caused. I can't undo it, but I can learn. I've started volunteering with a youth mentorship program for underprivileged kids. I want to make sure no child feels like you did that day. I'm sorry, truly. With respect. Karen Hollister." Amara read it twice. "Do you believe her?" Ava folded the letter carefully. "I don't know," she said. "But maybe she believes herself, and maybe that's a start." They decided not to reply. At least not yet. Some wounds, Ava thought, need silence more than words. Weeks later. As the first snow began to fall, Ava found herself standing at the airport again. Different gate, different city. Same hum of travelers moving through lives that intersected only for seconds. She and Amara were boarding a flight to Los Angeles to speak at a youth leadership summit. As they waited to board, a young black boy about 9 years old tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at them. "Mom." "That's the girls from the airplane," he whispered, eyes wide. His mother smiled warmly and walked over. "You don't know us," she said, "but I want to thank you. You made it safer for my son to fly." Ava smiled. "That means everything." When the boarding call came, they stepped onto the plane together. The flight attendant at the door greeted them with a genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Miss Daniels and Miss Daniels. We're honored to have you." Ava felt a lump rise in her throat as they took their seats 2A and 2B again. By coincidence or fate, Amara looked out the window, watching the runway lights blur through falling snow. "Full circle," she whispered. Ava nodded. "Full circle." As the plane lifted into the sky, the clouds glowed like silver in the sunlight. Ava leaned her head back and closed her eyes, remembering everything: the fear, the anger, the voices that told her to move, the strength that told her to stay. For the first time, the sound of the engines didn't make her tense. It made her feel free, and somewhere deep inside, she understood that redemption isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about growth. Sometimes the people who hurt you change because you refuse to bend. That night, far above the world that once doubted them, two sisters soared through the clouds, carrying with them not just their inventions, not just their courage, but the quiet certainty that they had already changed something that mattered. They didn't need applause. They didn't need revenge. They had justice and peace, and that was enough. Years passed, but the memory of Flight 2847 never faded. It became more than a headline, more than a moment. It became a lesson told in classrooms, a case study in corporate ethics, a chapter in textbooks about courage and change. What began as an injustice aboard a single flight had become a movement that shaped the future. By the time Ava Daniels turned 23, she had graduated from Stanford with honors in mechanical engineering and environmental systems. Her twin sister, Amara, had chosen public policy, determined to change laws with the same precision her sister used to design inventions. Together, they built a company that combined their strengths: AquaPure Solutions, now a thriving organization bringing clean water to communities across the world. The headquarters sat in a renovated brick warehouse in Atlanta, walls lined with murals painted by local artists. One wall bore a quote in soft silver letters: "We didn't move, and because of that, the world did." Every visitor who walked through the doors stopped to read it. On a cool October morning, Ava stood by that wall, sipping coffee and reviewing reports. The company had just secured a partnership with NASA to develop filtration systems for long-duration space missions. She smiled, thinking how far they'd come. Her assistant entered the office, holding a letter. "This just arrived, addressed to you and Amara." Ava took it, noticing the seal immediately, the U.S. Department of Education. She opened it carefully, and as she read, her breath caught. "Congratulations. The Daniels Scholarship for Equity and Innovation has officially awarded its 1,000th recipient. Your work continues to inspire generations of young scientists to pursue change through compassion." Ava closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of gratitude grounding her. She thought of the 9-year-old boy in the airport years ago, the one whose mother thanked them for making the world safer. Maybe now there were hundreds more like him, children who would never have to question if they belonged. When Amara walked in, carrying a tablet filled with data, Ava handed her the letter. Her sister's eyes widened. And then she grinned. 1,000 scholarships. Can you believe that Ava smiled softly? I can, because I believe in what we started. They spent the afternoon preparing for an upcoming conference in Washington, where Ava had been invited to deliver a keynote speech. It wasn't just any event, it marked the 5th anniversary of the Daniels Amendment, the law born from their ordeal. The organizers had asked her to speak about legacy. That evening, as the city lights flickered on outside the tall windows, Amara sat across the table, watching her sister write notes. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked quietly. Ava looked up. "Who, Karen Hollister?" Ava paused, her pen hovering above the paper. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I wonder if she kept volunteering." "I hope she did." Amara nodded. "I like to think she did too. People can change if they're willing to face themselves." Ava leaned back, her gaze softening. Maybe that's the real legacy, not just laws or headlines, but hearts that decide to do better. The next day, they flew to Washington together. The irony of being back on a plane wasn't lost on either of them. When the pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm and polite, Ava smiled faintly. Flying used to make her tense. Now it made her feel alive. The flight attendants greeted them warmly, offering congratulations when they recognized their names. No one asked them to move. No one questioned their presence. They belonged here, and everyone knew it. When the plane landed, the Capitol skyline stretched ahead, a symbol of everything they had once fought against and everything they had helped change. At the conference hall, the crowd was enormous. Lawmakers, students, scientists, activists all gathered to celebrate progress born from pain. The air buzzed with anticipation. As Ava stepped onto the stage, a spotlight followed her. For a brief moment, she thought of the scared teenager she had been on that flight, the trembling hands, the pounding heart, the quiet defiance. Then she took a deep breath and spoke. 5 years ago, she began, my sister and I boarded a plane expecting nothing more than a flight to New York. We were 2 teenagers chasing a dream of clean water and a fair world. But that day, the world reminded us that fairness isn't given, it's earned. We were told to move. We chose not to. And somehow, that choice changed everything. She paused, scanning the faces in the audience. The Daniels Amendment was never about punishment. It was about protection, about ensuring that dignity isn't negotiable. Because no matter where you sit, no matter what you look like, you deserve to be seen, respected, and safe. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Ava continued, her voice soft but strong. But laws are just ink on paper. Real change lives in the hearts of people who decide every day to be better than yesterday. The flight attendant who wrote us years later, she taught me that redemption is possible. The businessman who stood up for us taught me that silence can break cycles. And my sister, who never let go of my hand, taught me that courage doesn't have to be loud. It just has to hold on. Amara's eyes filled with tears. Ava's voice warmed. We are proof that even the smallest acts, refusing to move, refusing to be silent, can change an entire system. So, to every young person watching, you have the power to rewrite the rules. You just have to believe that your truth matters. When she finished, the crowd rose in applause. Some stood. Some cried. The sound filled the hall, a wave of gratitude and hope echoing against marble walls. After the speech, a young woman approached the stage. She was around 20, dressed in a navy blazer, holding a notebook. "Ms. Daniels," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm one of the Daniels scholars. I grew up in foster care. I didn't think I'd make it to college, but your scholarship did more than pay for my tuition. It made me believe I belonged somewhere. Ava smiled, her chest tightening. You always belonged. You just needed someone to remind you. The girl's eyes glistened. I'm studying aerospace engineering. Someday, I want to work for NASA, too. Ava laughed softly. Then I'll see you there. That night, as they walked out of the conference center, the air cool and crisp, Amara linked her arm through her sister's. You did it again, she said. Ava chuckled. We did it again. They walked past the reflecting pool, the Capitol lights shimmering across the water. The scene reminded Ava of something her father once said. The higher you climb, the louder the wind, but the view is still worth it. She stopped for a moment, gazing at their reflections side by side. You know, she said quietly, I used to think the legacy of that flight was the law, but it's not. Amara tilted her head. Then what is it? It's us, Ava said, and everyone who chooses to stand up after seeing what happened. That's the legacy. Not one moment, but all the moments that follow. Amara smiled, leaning her head on her sister's shoulder. Then I guess the story's not over. No, Ava whispered. It's still flying. Years later, long after headlines moved on and history books began to include their story in a single paragraph, the impact lived quietly in the world. In classrooms, teachers told students about courage. In airports, flight crews remembered the training that bore the Daniels name. In distant villages, children drank clean water filtered through AquaPure systems. And sometimes, when Ava traveled alone, she would look out at the clouds from her window seat and think about how fragile and vast life could be. How one small act refusing to move could ripple outward like wings cutting through air. She would smile, take a deep breath, and whisper to herself, we belong here. Because now, she knew they always had. The story of the Daniels twins is more than an act of defiance. It's a reminder of what it means to live with quiet strength. They didn't fight with anger. They stood with truth. Their courage reminds us that dignity is not something given by others. It's something we must claim, protect, and pass forward. In a world that often measures worth by status, race, or privilege, these young women taught us that real power lies in knowing who you are, refusing to shrink when others try to define you. They showed that change begins not in courtrooms or Congress halls, but in small, personal choices moments when ordinary people decide to do what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. For older generations watching, this story echoes something familiar: the long road toward respect, fairness, and equality. It reminds us that while progress can be slow, it is real and it is built by those who refuse to move from their truth. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every click helps these voices of courage reach further, reminding the world that respect, justice, and empathy still matter. Together, we can keep these stories alive because change doesn't start with systems. It starts with people like you who choose to listen, care, and act.